Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you are here. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight, we'll continue our reading of E. Franklin Frazier's Black Bourgeoisie. The section that we're reading is called Inferiority Complex and the Quest for Status, continuing on page 118.
Greetings. My name is the Revolutionary Matron, and my show is called The Learning Curve. I broadcast on a network called KWAZ Radio. There are other hosts on the network I'd like you to meet.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed here belong solely to the respondent, and they do not necessarily reflect any broadcast networks, affiliates, nor sponsors. The Learning Curve is a broadcast created for the benefit of my global community. Black is a consciousness. Content is being used for our commentary, research, criticism, education, scholarship, teaching, preaching, and news reporting. No copyright infringement is intended. I will make enunciation mistakes. I will give you my opinion about the information. And if you ever ask, I will send you my source.
Half a man in a white man's country. The primary aim of the North in the Civil War was to save the Union. Lincoln made this clear in a letter to Horace Greeley in August of 1862, in which he stated, "My paramount object in this struggle is to save the Union and not either save nor destroy slavery." Whatever he did about slavery and Negroes was a part of his official duty and was not intended to modify his personal wish that all men everywhere could be free. Less than a month after writing this letter, he stated in a speech in Chicago that slavery was at the root of the rebellion and that the emancipation of the Negro would help the Union cause in Europe. That's about economics. This growing recognition on the part of Lincoln that the emancipation of the Negro was tied up with the struggle of the North against the South was due partly to the question which had been raised concerning the employment of Negro soldiers in Northern armies. In fact, the employment of Negroes as soldiers in the Union Army posed the crucial question of the future status of the Negro in American society. Lincoln did not have much faith in the ability of Negroes to be trained as officers. He had stated that if Negroes were given arms, within a few weeks, their arms would be in the hands of the Southern rebels. Lincoln shared the prejudices of the masses of Northern whites, to whom, as Du Bois has said well, the Negro was a curiosity, a subhuman minstrel, willing and naturally a slave, and treated as well as he deserved to be. He had not sense enough to revolt and help the Northern armies, even if the Northern armies were trying to emancipate him, which they were not. The North shrank at the very thought of encouraging servile insurrection against the whites. General Hunter, an abolitionist, had recruited Negro soldiers in South Carolina after applying in vain to Washington for reinforcements. His action provoked a long debate in Congress, which resulted in the disbanding of his Negro regiment. It was only after the Emancipation Proclamation and a pressing need for manpower that the War Department authorized the employment of Negro soldiers. So you hear that? They didn't want us to fight for our own freedom, but we were always willing to fight for our own freedom. The general attitude of the North towards the arming of the Negro was indicated by the fact that when it was planned for the first two regiments authorized by the War Department, which were the 54th and the 55th Massachusetts regiments, to pass through New York City, the chief of police warned that they would be insulted and it was necessary for these regiments to go by sea to the theater of war in South Carolina. Because of the general opposition to the enlistment of Negroes as soldiers, many difficulties beset their recruitment. It was regarded as a stigma for white officers to serve in Negro regiments. Then there was opposition in Congress to giving Negro soldiers the same pay as white soldiers. It was not until 1864 that it was finally agreed that Negro soldiers should receive the same pay as white soldiers. And then they made more white people officers. This was not strange in view of the fact that the Negro in the North outside of New England did not live under the same laws as the whites. Nearly 200,000 Negro soldiers served in the Civil War, which became, despite the intention of the majority of Northern leaders, a war of emancipation. Since the Negro has contributed to the success of Northern arms, they felt that they had earned the right to freedom and citizenship. There has been an attempt to disparage the contribution of the Negro soldiers to the victory of the North, but the unprejudiced white officers who led Negro soldiers testified to their courage and efficiency. This was, however, only the beginning of a campaign of disparagement of the Negro soldier, which was to continue until World War II, and it continues to this day. Soon after his emancipation, the Negro began to experience disillusionment about the meaning of freedom. The Southern states enacted the Black Codes, which really re-enslaved the Negro. Restrictions were placed upon the occupations in which the freedmen could enter. Provisions were made for them to be apprenticed to their former masters, and severe penalties provided for their failure to keep their labor contracts, quote unquote, with the planters and for being impudent to whites. It was the enactment of these Black Codes by the Southern states that provided the moral justification for placing the South under military rule and using military power to guarantee the rights of the Negro as a citizen. Greetings, Forecast. Thanks for tuning in. For a brief period, less than a decade in most Southern states, the Negro enjoyed the rights of a citizen. If the Second American Revolution had not been aborted, it would have established a democracy in the South in which the poor whites and Black freedmen would have shared power. Leaders like Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts and the Congressman Thaddeus Stevens of Pennsylvania wanted to divide up the plantations and create a class of Black and white small farmers who would have formed the basis of this democracy. But the industrialists in the North were not interested in democracy. They were interested in the exploitation of the resources of the South and in forming an allegiance with the emerging middle classes. As a consequence, Northern troops were withdrawn from the South when the Negro's vote was no longer needed. The so-called restoration of white supremacy really meant the political domination of the Bourbons, or the alliance of the planters and the new industrial and commercial classes in the South. During the Reconstruction period, there had never been any Negro domination in the South. Although the Republican Party in the South depended upon Negro voters, it also had white Southern supporters who were called scalawags. The race issue was utilized to defeat not only the Republican Party, but the Democratic upsurge, which was threatened by the alliance of the Black freedmen and the poor whites. Under the political dominance of the Bourbons, the poor whites were in about the same economic condition as the freedmen. And this is why they think we should align ourselves with the poor whites. The challenge is that psychologically, they still think of themselves as white and better than Black people, because you can convince the lowest level white person that they are better than a Black person, and they'll believe it. The restoration of white supremacy in the South did not resolve the class conflict within the white community. This opened the way for the rise of the Southern demagogues who offered a solution to the class conflict that did not threaten the economic interests of the property class while offering some relief to the poor whites. As we have seen in the introduction, their program provided for the complete disenfranchisement of Negroes. The diversion of public schools, I think that should be the division of public school funds, no, the diversion of public school funds from Negro schools to white schools, and the establishment of a system of legalized racial segregation. What has erroneously been called the rise of the poor whites in the 1890s inaugurated a period in the history of the Negro in the United States during which a studied campaign was carried on to prove that the Negro was subhuman, morally degenerate, and incapable of being educated. But they had taken all of the funds and diverted them to white schools. So they took the money and the resources away from these people. So it's always been a fight for resources. And when you take resources away, of course people's morals decline and they begin to act in subhuman ways, and they don't have the education that they need. Of course, these things happen because they have been resource starved. That's why creating jobs for Black youth is so important. That's why creating programs for the youth is so important. It's important to have a resourced community. Although the Bourbons had achieved political power on the racial issue, they often had as little regard for poor whites as for poor Negroes. Once in power, they were willing to leave the voteless and landless Negroes in peace. But the demagogic leaders of the poor whites carried on a ceaseless campaign of terror and vituperation against all persons of Negro descent for over a quarter of a century. The Southern white politicians who carried on this campaign had the support of the property classes, the newspaper, and the clergy. They carried their campaign to the halls of Congress of the United States, where they met with scarcely any opposition. The North had become weary and ashamed of its idealism about the Negro and had agreed that the South could best handle the Negro problem, so they abandoned us in our time of need. At the same time, the Supreme Court of the United States had been nullifying or curtailing the rights of Negroes, which had been written into the amendments of the Constitution or into laws. because constitutional amendments, laws, and legislation doesn't matter if it doesn't have any enforcement. During the 1890s, 2 to 3 Negroes were lynched a week. In 1898, there was a riot in Wilmington, North Carolina, during which Negroes were murdered, their property was destroyed, they were evicted from the petty offices to which they were elected, and driven from the city. In regard to the Negroes' fitness to vote, Senator Vardaman of Mississippi declared, "It matters not what his vote, the Negro's, advertised mental and moral qualifications may be. I am just as much opposed to Booker T. Washington as a voter with all his Anglo-Saxon reinforcements as I am to the coconut-headed, chocolate-colored, typical little coon, Andy Dodson, who blacks my shoes every morning. Neither is fit to exercise the supreme function of citizenship." So he didn't care what the black person looked like and where they came from. They were not fit to vote, in his opinion. Then there was Senator Tillman of South Carolina, who advocated the killing of 30,000 Negroes in his state and declared in a public lecture in Detroit, Michigan, on one occasion, that he did not know how many Negroes he had killed. In the Congress of the United States in 1898, David A. DeArmond of Missouri described Negroes as being almost too ignorant to eat, scarcely wise enough to breathe, and merely existing human machines. There is a movement out there that believes that Black people are obsolete farm equipment, and those people have money and resources to exercise their particular ideology. They have meetings, they discuss us as a whole, they study us, and they are looking for a way to eradicate us. And as AI and all of these other technologies make less humans necessary on the planet because they don't need humans to do the work, they will look for more ways to destroy us, their obsolete farm equipment. While public opinion and the personal attitudes of whites concerning the Negro were being formed by politicians and newspapers, there appeared in 1900 a book entitled The Negro, a Beast, published by the American Book and Bible House. The publishers of this book stated in the preface that if this book were considered in an intelligent and prayerful manner, that it will be to the minds of the American people like unto the voice of God from the clouds appealing to Paul on his way to Damascus. In order that the American people might be convinced of the scientific nature of the biblical truths presented in this book, the author included pictures of God and an idealized picture of a white man in order to prove that white people were made in the image of God, as stated in the Bible, and the caricature of the Negro showing that he could not have been made in the image of God. This book had a wide circulation, especially among the church-going whites, and helped to fix in their minds, as it was argued in the last chapter of this book, that the Negro was not the son of Ham or even the descendant of Adam and Eve, but simply a beast without a soul. Christianity, in some aspects, is self-harm because this book that had these horrible ideas about us as a people was widely circulated by a Christian publishing company. While this book was giving a religious sanction to current beliefs concerning the inferiority of the Negro's inferiority was being engraved in every public edifice, the railroad stations, courthouses, and theaters, with signs showing rear entrances for Negroes or kitchens in which Negroes might be served. Moreover, in every representation of the Negro, he was pictured as a gorilla dressed up like a man. His picture was never carried in the newspapers of the South. The same rule holds true today in most parts of the South, unless he had committed a crime. In the newspapers, the Negro was described as burly or ape-like, and even Negroes who looked like whites were represented in cartoons as black with gorilla features. All of this fitted into the stereotype which represented the Negro as subhuman or a beast without any human qualities. This vilification of the Negro continued until the second decade of the 20th century. They do the vilification today by not allowing us to be actual victims. If a black person is lynched or killed or subject to murder or some other crime, the first thing they do is try to find the most negative thing they can about that black person and report that first before they actually allow us to be a victim. A so-called authoritative study of the Negro published as a doctoral dissertation in the Columbia University Studies in History, Economics, and Public Law accepted as scientific evidence the statement that the Negro was as destitute of morals as any of the lower animals. In the very year in which the First World War was started, an advertised authority on the Negro stated in a book that the Negro was an instinctive criminal. Then, in 1915, an army surgeon assured the American people that many animals below man manifest a far greater amount of real affection in their lovemaking than do Negroes, and that it is very rare that we see two Negroes kiss each other because they're trying to study us. Always remember that. They're even studying their observations and they're observing and documenting how they think we manage relationships. It is not surprising that when this book was written, a Negro could not sing a sentimental song on the American stage. During this campaign to prove that the Negro was subhuman and unfit for human association, the masses of Negroes found a refuge within the isolated world of the Negro folk. Their lives revolved principally around their churches, where they sang their songs of resignation and looked forward to another world in which they might escape the contempt and disdain of the white man. The Negro who migrated to a northern city discovered that he was only half a man in the white man's world. The educated middle-class Negroes who had striven to conform to American ideals and had contacts with a larger social world could not find refuge in the world of the Negro folk. In the South, they were subject to the same Jim Crow laws and contempt as the Negro masses, and in the North, they were outsiders. The mass migrations of Negroes to northern cities and the impact of two world wars upon the United States changed the revelation of the Negro to American society. but Negroes have still remained outsiders who still face the problem of being integrated into American society. Remember, integration and assimilation are forms of death because if you fully integrate into their society, you are no longer Black physically. The Black bourgeoisie, who have striven to mold themselves in the image of the white man, have not been able to escape from the mark of racial inferiority. Greetings, Brother Bakari. Thanks for tuning in. The struggle for status and recognition. Although the old Black bourgeoisie or Negro upper class was not able to find a refuge in the world of the Negro folk, nevertheless, they were sheltered to some extent against the contempt and terror of the white man because they lived within the segregated Negro world. Their privileged position at the top of the social pyramid, behind the walls of segregation, provided some compensation for their hurt self-esteem. But while the Negro folk were exposed to a greater extent to the violence of the whites, the Black bourgeoisie was more exposed in a spiritual sense. Except for the economic relations with the whites, the Negro folk could retreat within their own world with its peculiar religious life, recreation, and family and sex life. Moreover, since the thinking of the Negro folk was not affected as that of the Black bourgeoisie by the books and papers in which the Negro's inferiority was proclaimed, the Black bourgeoisie suffered spiritually, not only because they were affected by ideas concerning the Negro's inferiority, but perhaps even more because they had adopted the white man's values and patterns of behavior. So this was more damaging to the Black bourgeoisie. Consequently, they have developed an intense inferiority complex, and because of this inferiority complex, sought compensations. A large section of the old middle class sought compensations in their white heritage. They picked their white side. They were not merely proud of their white complexion, but they boasted of their kinship with aristocratic whites in the South. In fact, in some cases, their white ancestors had helped them to secure an education or had provided for them economically. They also sought compensations in the standards of puritanical family and sex morals, which set them apart from the Black masses. But the chief compensation for their inferior status in American society was found in education. While their racial heritage and conventional standards of morality only gave them a privileged position in the Negro community, education gave them access to a world of ideas and provided an intellectual escape from their physical and social segregation in American life. Therefore, they placed an exaggerated importance upon academic degrees, especially if they were secured from white colleges in the North. If one secured the degree of a Doctor of Philosophy in a Northern university, he was regarded as a sort of genius. Consequently, for the relatively small group of educated Negroes, education was an indication of their superior culture and a mark of refinement. Education was not simply a form of compensation because it set them apart from the Negro masses. It provided a form of compensation as regards their relations with whites. They constantly asserted their educational and cultural superiority to the majority of the whites whose education was inferior to theirs. Whenever they had contacts with white men who called them by their first names or insulted them, they would take consolation in the fact that the white man was ignorant and could not appreciate art or literature or the things of the spirit as they could. When not Du Bois, was not Du Bois expressing this type of compensation when, while a professor of sociology in Atlanta University during the early years of the century, he wrote, "I sit with Shakespeare, and he winces not. Across the color line, I move arm in arm with Balzac and Dumas, where smiling men and welcoming women glide in gilded hall." Despite their solid achievements and the satisfactions which they derived from their way of life, there was always an atmosphere of unreality surrounding the isolated life of the small Black middle class. As we have seen, urbanization and the increasing occupational differentiation, or the different jobs that they had, of the Negro population undermined the privileged position of the old middle class. But more important still, the compensations which ancestry, puritanical morals, and especially education provided in a hostile white world were inadequate in the life of the new Black bourgeoisie. Having become less isolated and thus more exposed to the contempt and hostility of the white world, but at the same time cherishing the values of the white world, the new Black bourgeoisie, with more money at their disposal, have sought compensations in the things that money can buy. Moreover, their larger incomes have enabled them to propagate false notions about their place in American life and to create a world of make-believe. It is to a description and analysis of this make-believe world in which the Black bourgeoisie live that the second part of this study is devoted. Greetings, KW Don 7. Thanks for tuning in. So as you can see, the Black bourgeoisie in their minds felt that they were better than poor whites, but they still accepted the degradation and name calling from the whites because they lived in a reality where they were Black. They thought themselves different from the Black masses and had no cultural ties or connection to the Black masses. So they were an isolated group of people with white values and Black skin, and that caused them great horror. Part 2, the world of make-believe. Negro business, a social myth. In the first section, we saw the capital investment represented by Negro business was insignificant from the standpoint of the American economy, and that it provided for an exceedingly small amount of employment and income for Negro workers. Here, our purpose is to show how false ideas concerning the importance of Negro business have become a social myth and how this myth has been propagated among Negroes. This social myth has been one of the main elements in the world of make-believe, which the Black bourgeoisie have created to compensate for its feeling of inferiority in a white world dominated by business enterprise. Origin of the myth. When did this myth first take form? It was formulated, it should be noted, during the last decade of the 19th century, when a legal system of racial separation and subordination was inaugurated in the hope of Negroes to attain equality in American life was crushed. The myth was created by a small group of Negro intellectuals and Negro leaders who accepted racial separation as the inevitable solution for the race problem. From the 1880s on, as Professor Harris has pointed out in his The Negro as Capitalist, he states, the Negro masses, urged by their leaders, were led to place increasing faith in business and property as a means of escaping poverty and achieving economic independence. Although ostensibly sponsored as the means of self help or racial cooperation, as it was sometimes called, through which the masses were to be economically emancipated, Negro business enterprise was motivated primarily by the desire for private profit and to look toward the establishment of a Negro capitalist employer class. One of the clearest expressions of the growing tendency to look upon the development of Negro capitalist and business enterprise as the basis of racial economic advancement is to be found in the proceedings of the Fourth Atlanta University Conference in 1898 on the Negro in business. At this conference, the best formulation of the myth of the economic salvation of the Negro through Negro business was presented by the late John Hope, who later on, after becoming president of the Atlanta University system, which was exclusively for Negroes at the time, hoped to train the future leaders of the Negro business, stated, industrial education and labor unions for Negroes will not change this condition, which was the displacement of Negro workers by white workers. They may modify it, but the condition will not be materially changed. The white man will meet the Negro on the same ground and work for the same wages. That much we may as well take for granted, calculate the consequences of, and strive by every means to overcome this falling off in our time and our old time advantages. We must take in some, if not all, of the wages and turn it into capital. Hold it, increase it. This must be done as a means of employment for the thousands who cannot get work from old sources. Employment must be had, and this employment will have to come to Negroes from Negro sources. This phase of the Negro's condition is so easily seen that it needs no further consideration. Negro capital will have to give an opportunity to Negro workmen who will be crowded out by white competition. And when I say Negro workmen, I would include both sexes. Employment for colored men and women, colored boys and girls must be supplied by colored people. Greetings, Sazamami. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are living among the so-called Anglo-Saxons and dealing with them. They are a conquering people who turn their conquests into their pockets. Business seems to be not simply the raw material of Anglo-Saxon civilizations, and by business, I mean those efforts directly or indirectly concerned with the purposive tendency to material development and progress, with the point in view of the effort bringing material profit or advantage to the one making the effort. And I would include all such efforts, whether made in peace or war. I was saying business seems to not only simply to be not only simply the raw material of Anglo-Saxon civilization, but almost the civilization itself. It is at least its mainspring to action. Living among such a people is it not obvious that we cannot escape its most powerful motive and survive? To the finite vision, to say the least, the policy of avoiding entrance in the world's business would be suicide to the Negro. Yet, as a matter of great account, we ought to note that as good a showing as we have made, that showing is but a as pebbles on the shore of business enterprise. Among the resolutions adopted at the conference was the following: the mass of Negroes must learn to patronize business enterprises conducted by their own race, even at some slight disadvantage. We must cooperate or we are lost. 10 million people who join in intelligent self-help can never be long ignored or mistreated. So they were, Brother Bakari often says, hold your damn money. And they were saying that at this time, hold your money, patronize Black businesses. It's going to be at a disadvantage, but you have to patronize Black businesses that have a similar consciousness to your consciousness, or else it's not going to do any good, because it doesn't do any good to patronize a Black business that's hiring non-Black people. It doesn't do any good to patronize a Black business that's not creating jobs for Black people in the community, that's not supporting Black youth, that's not um, that's not doing things for Black people. Okay, so hold your money, support Black business, but check the consciousness of those businesses. The myth becomes institutionalized. 2 years after the Atlanta Conference on the Negro in Business, Booker T. Washington took the initiative in organizing the National Negro Business League, which held its first meeting in Boston, Massachusetts. At this meeting, attended by 115 delegates from 20 states, most of which were Southern, and the District of Columbia, Washington was elected president of the permanent organization. The 4 sessions of the 2-day meeting were characterized by much oratory and enthusiasm. In his opening address, Washington made the highly dubious generalization that wherever he had seen a Black man who was succeeding in business, who was a taxpayer, and who possessed intelligence and high character, that individual was treated with the highest respect by the members of the white race. Now you have to remember, Booker T. Washington held a special place in the hearts of white people because he had been educated by white people, and white people were his primary benefactors. He sought philanthropy from white people. So he had a very different relationship with white people versus the relationship that the mass of our people were having with white people. Faith in the power of business enterprise and money to wipe out racial prejudice was repeatedly echoed by the delegates, one of whom stated, "Fortunately, human selfishness, the desire of every man to get all he can with least effort or money, has banished all prejudice. These are the people that think that green is the only color that matters, when green is not the only color that matters. Your ethnicity is what matters. Your skin color is what matters. Because if green were the only thing that matters, then we would have been in a much better position. They wouldn't have been lynching business owners. They wouldn't have been lynching the postmasters. They wouldn't have been lynching people that owned businesses. So green is not the only color that matters. Sassy Mommy says, by the way, created institutions to combat white folk and funded revolution. Yes, Booker T. Washington did create institutions to combat white folks and funded revolution in some instances, but his public facing persona that the mass of Black people had experience with was not one that knew that. But yes, he did do that. And those things later came out. So green is not the only color that matters. These sentiments, it might be noted, won the approval of the leading Boston white daily paper because they want to lull you into a sense of security. They want you to believe that green is the only color that matters when they're making rules on their boards of directors and trustees that exclude you from the opportunities. We've learned that with redlining, we learned that with gentrification, we learned that with the HUD, we learned that with the VA, that they will sit there and they will tell you one thing, and they will tell you if you qualify uh, that you should be able to receive these benefits, and they will tell you that you should be able to live wherever you want to live, but there's no enforcement of those rules, and they sit in rooms making decisions that go against your very interests while telling you that green is the only thing that matters when that's not even what they practice. By far, most of the oratory at this meeting was devoted to the achievements of the Negro in business and the bright future for the Negro in the field of business enterprise. At one point during the meeting, the compiler or statistician interrupted the oratory to announce that according to information provided by the delegates, they owned personal and real property amounting to $781,900 at that time. In the enthusiasm of the meeting, it appeared that no one stopped to realize that even if the figures were true, they represented a very small amount of wealth for 115 businessmen. Nor does it seem that anyone gave sober thought to the report which was presented on the character of Negro business and the amount of capital which it represented. The report included the study presented at the Atlanta conference, according to which 432 of the 1906 Negro businessmen who sent in reports had small grocery stores, 166 were general merchandise dealers, 162 were barbers with $500 or more invested in their business, 80 were undertakers, 68 were owners of saloons, 64 had drugstores, and 61 had restaurants. The study presented a fair idea of the character of Negro business, since the figures from the United States Census gave a similar picture. These 1906 Negro businessmen represented about a tenth of all the persons reported in the census who, by the broad definition given to business by the National Negro Business League, were regarded as engaged in business. For example, The League counted as Negro businessmen the boarding and lodging housekeepers, hucksters and peddlers, and newsboys reported in the census. But what else would be expected in a meeting which was designed to bolster faith in a myth? The delegates were urged to spread the faith in this myth by organizing local business leagues throughout the country. Jigen says, classic red herring, tell us to follow the green while they focus on so-called white survival. Exactly. Exactly. Part 3. Propagation of the myth. The success of the exhortation to spread the faith in salvation by business is indicated by the fact that within 5 years, more than 300 local business leagues were organized. Then, in 1907, there appeared a book on Negro business by Booker T. Washington, who was elected year after year president of the National Business League. And this should be the Negro National Business League. This book, which according to the author was written to take note of the undoubted business awakening among the Negro people in the United States, contained a series of success stories concerning Negroes in various enterprises. The series begins with the story showing how the Negro farmer often passes from agriculture into business. Outstanding among these farmers who had become businessmen was a Negro farmer from Kansas who became known as the Negro Potato King. There followed stories of Negroes who had succeeded as caterers, hotel keepers, undertakers, publishers, and bankers. One of the leading bankers was a minister whose success, according to Washington, showed how closely the moral and spiritual interests of our people are interwoven with their material and economical welfare. It was not strange that a minister was named among the successful Negro businessmen, since the membership of the League was composed largely of professional Negroes, many of whom could hardly have been regarded as businessmen. If one examines the list of members of the leagues, especially those holding the offices, it will be found that they represent the leadership of Negroes without respect to their relation to business enterprise. So these people don't necessarily have the experience to lead. These people are just being put in position. In fact, the report of the 11th annual conference of the League, which was held in New York City in 1910, stated as one of the notable features of this convention that a diversity of interests was represented. Stated otherwise, it was notable in the sense that the crusade to gain supporters for the faith in business enterprise as the salvation of the Negro was gaining adherents among Negroes in all walks of life. The religious nature of this crusade was indicated in the annual address by Booker T. Washington, which was delivered in the form of a business sermon based upon the biblical text. To him that hath shall be given. According to Washington, these lines, spoken by the master, strike the keynote for individual success and equally so for racial success. He exhorted his hearers to go out from the meeting determined that each individual shall be a missionary in his community, a missionary in teaching the masses to get property, to be more thrifty, more economical, and resolved to establish an industrial enterprise wherever a possibility presents itself. Well, isn't that rich? Wherever a possibility presents itself, if they won't sell you the land, then how can an opportunity present itself? If they won't sell you the supplies that you need, then how can an opportunity possibly present itself? But this was his advice. In this same address, Washington also stated that before the starting of the Business League, there was not a single Negro bank in the state of Mississippi. At the present time, Mississippi has 11 Negro banks. When this business league was organized in Boston 10 years ago, there were only 4 banks in the United States. At the present time, there are 56 Negro banks. If Washington were living today, he would probably be saddened by the fact that there are no Negro banks in the state of Mississippi and that there are only 11 Negro banks in the United States, with total assets amounting to less than a single white bank in many small cities. But at the time that the myth of Negro business was being propagated, little concern was shown for the real economic position of the Negro and his experience in business. At each annual meeting of the League, the delegates were exhorted to spread the faith in business enterprise and were told of the golden opportunities to reap wealth by supplying the needs of the Negro masses. At the 13th Annual Convention in Chicago in 1912, Washington asked in his annual address, if the white man can secure wealth and happiness by owning and operating a coal mine, brickyard, or lime kiln, why cannot more Negroes do the same thing? If other races can attain prosperity by securing riches on a large scale from our seas, lakes, and rivers in the form of fish or other seafoods, thousands of Negroes can do the same thing. Activity in all these directions finds no races or color line. 2 years later, when the League met in Muskogee, Oklahoma, Washington stated that when the 2 million Negroes in the Southwest have made the most of their opportunities and brought up the riches contained in the earth, they will be able to support 1,000 more grocery stores owned by Negroes, 500 additional dry goods stores, 300 more shoe stores, 200 more good restaurants and hotels, 300 additional millinery stores, 200 additional drug stores, and 40 more banks. These fantastic dreams of business enterprise were applauded by the delegates who attended the annual meetings. Moreover, the delegates themselves engaged in oratory about the progress of the Black bourgeoisie in obtaining wealth. They related stories of the acquisition of wealth in business enterprises, which often, when coldly studied, were really of little significance. Nevertheless, the crusade to win believers in the myth of Negro business continued after these conventions closed. It was preached during the pilgrimages which Washington made through the South. During these pilgrimages, he constantly pointed out to the Negroes the opportunities which they were overlooking for gaining wealth through business enterprises, and he invited Negro businessmen to give testimonies of their achievements in gaining wealth. Do you think this was helpful in Tulsa, Oklahoma? Because if just getting money is all it was about, then don't you think these black cities that are underwater, where the residents had money and resource and financial literacy, don't you think that these towns and cities would have been able to make it? It's not about the money. They got together and made a plan. They were mad and jealous about the prosperity of black people, and they destroyed these places. After the death of Washington, the League continued to carry on the crusade to instill in Negroes faith in business enterprise as the way to economic salvation. Under the influence of the enthusiasm and oratory which characterized these meetings, the participants continued to relate all sorts of fanciful stories concerning their wealth. Myths grew up concerning Negro millionaires that had no basis in fact. The participants, who were drawn from many fields of professional activities, were often led to describe their activities as being inspired by the spirit of business enterprise. For example, at a meeting in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1917, Eugene K. Jones, the executive secretary of the National League on Urban Conditions of Negroes, a social work agency, declared that his agency was a business organization which made a business of social welfare work. While the myth of Negro business was being propagated, the hard realities of the Negro's insignificant achievements in business were apparent to anyone who was not under the spell of the oratory of the conventions of the League. So if you weren't there listening to this nonsense, it didn't impact you because you knew the truth. In order to create a substantial basis for the myth, the National Negro Business League undertook to establish the Colored Merchant Society, or the CMA, grocery stores throughout the country. According to the CMA plan, 10 or more Negro retail stores in any city were to buy a share of stock in the CMA, in which they pay weekly dues and buy from a wholesale dealer selected by the League. The first CMA organization was established in Montgomery, Alabama in 1928, and soon thereafter, organizations were set up in about 18 other cities. The organization of the CMA was hailed as a new and realistic approach of the League to the promotion of business enterprise among Negroes. The Chicago Whip, a Negro newspaper, stated that the establishment of the CMA stores marked the end of the period of oratory and added, "It is well known now that flamboyant oratory makes no lasting impression, gives no deep insight into the manner in which things are done, nor does it convey information that the untrained businessman is so badly in need of." The establishment of the CMA stores was marked by much fanfare. In Harlem, in New York City, the opening of the CMA stores was celebrated by a parade which included men and women from business, fraternal, and church circles. Despite the fanfare and hopes of the bourgeoisie, the CMA movement failed after a few years because they didn't understand how to structure a co-op. Those who had brought stock in the CMA lost their money, if not their faith in Negro business enterprise. Those who maintained their faith are still not sure whether the failure was due to the lack of support by Negro retailers or that Negro consumers preferred nationally advertised products. The failure of the CMA adventures did not affect the faith of the Black bourgeoisie in the myth of Negro businesses, since the faith was constantly being strengthened by the expansion of business education among Negro colleges. The number of Negro colleges giving business education grew from 6 in 1900 to more than 20 in 1940. The majority of the students pursuing courses in business receive a technical education in such subjects as typewriting, bookkeeping, and shorthand. In 5 of the Negro colleges, the students are given professional courses in management and other functions exercised by the owners and officials in business enterprises. A small number are prepared to teach the business courses which they have studied. Of the 35 graduates of Atlanta universities who received their master's degree in business, 5 were teaching business and 8 were employed in Negro colleges as treasurers, business managers, bursars, and 1 is a registrar. Although 29 of the 35 were employed in fields related to the business courses they had taken, it does not appear that business education had enabled them to become entrepreneurs because they didn't have that information transmission from the white universities. The vast majority of students who take technical and business courses in Negro colleges could acquire the same technical competence in some commercial business school, but in the Negro college, business education is given professional status and is glorified because of the myth of Negro business as a way to economic salvation for the Negro in American society. And we're going to stop right there for today because I want to make sure that I get you guys comments if you have any. Brother Bakari says the problem was we didn't use our money to build militias. The reason Mound Bayou exists today is that they had a militia. So as you can see, when it comes to business education, they're not going to give you the education you need to be a venture capitalist or give you the credit, or even if you have the education, you usually don't have access to the credit because you're Black. And that's still true to this day because you have to have good credit. We don't have any institutions backing us up so that we can take out loans and take out funds from and take out lines of credit from these institutions in an attempt to build to fund the ideas that we have. I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in today. I want to thank KW Don 7, Brother Bakari, The Forecast, Sassy Mama, Jai Jin. I know that Sister Raw and the elders are listening. I know that Bawana Haguziki is listening. I know that Koku is listening from the Pro Black. I know that Anthony McPhail is listening. I know that Oni is listening from the pro-Black perspective, and so many others. Hey, Brother Bakari, how you doing tonight?
What's up, Madron? How you doing?
I'm all right.
Well, let me make myself clear when I say militia, because we all know what a militia is. But what I meant, that was one of the things we needed. Let me make myself clear, because they attacked in several different ways. So when I say Mount Bayou still exists because of their militia, yeah, it existed. It's still the oldest, the first and last all Black town in this country. Still, no person but Black people ever lived in Mount Bayou, Mississippi. But they were attacked in a different way. When you talking about access to the money and certain things and how they attack, what they did to them, uh Mount Bayou was in the middle. They was survived. One of the things, one of their big businesses was what people did on the railroad. So what the poor white towns did, what poor white people did, and black people always trying to cape for poor folk. But what the poor white people did started complaining, saying y'all stopping in Mountain Bayou and you're not stopping it. But Mountain Bayou had superior everything. That's where the black people were. But being loyal to white people, what they did was they moved the train stop from Mount Bayou and moved it up to a white town, and that was the beginning of the end. The end of Mount Bayou being successful, truly successful, was around 1983. Money that was clearly saved from ex-slaves and put for the community. That town took care of itself for more than 100 years. But they got somebody got in office in Mississippi annexed and said, "Oh, it should be part of the county. It shouldn't be in." Still, ain't nobody ever lived there but black people. And in that process, Highway 61, there was a gas station. A white guy stopped to get some gas in Mount Bayou, Mississippi, and got out of the car and stepped on the highway and twisted his ankle, broke his ankle in a pothole, and got about $25 million. All of the money that these people, all of the money that our people had saved from the time of slavery. So they're attacked in different ways. So I was just making it clear about when them coming to attack and try to fight, the problem was no militia. I wasn't saying that was the end all to be all, but we do need some protection, and it's getting to the point. Everything you was just reading about today is getting to that point again. It's been to that point, but
Hmm.
it's right in our face today. It's in our face right now. And how many of us are truly prepared?
They not ready.
And that is something we have talked about on my channel. I have done several shows, several lives on prepare things that you need. And when you can have somebody who can do a live video recording and threaten the government and say, first they put out their Project 25. Now the leader of the people that put out Project 2025, America is on the verge of a second revolution. And if the left don't get out of the way, there will be bloodshed. How many of us have been preparing to defend ourselves? How many? We're in the same position as a lot of our people back then was, because we don't take we don't take their threats seriously. We talk about the past, we talk about the history, and it's good to know. But if you don't learn anything from the past, if you don't learn anything from history, there's truly, in my honest opinion, if you don't learn anything from history, there's no need to talk about what you know from history. That because we're in this position again. Everything you're reading about, we're in this position now. No access to money then, no access to stuff now. I understood what Booker T was saying, talking about business. I talk about business. But one thing we have to understand, when I talk about business, I make it plain and clear. It's what we have to do together. See, we still have to stop looking at white folks saying our business is going to be like theirs. We have to look and see and appreciate what we have, and we should be controlling the economy in our community, spending our money together. It's been preached and preached and preached for years. It's been taught for years. And now we're to a point to we don't even have a community, and we have nothing to protect us. We have our talking about open borders. Our neighborhood are open borders to everybody. And what's coming down the pipeline right now, with these people making a president gonna be the ultimate dictator, gonna be the king. He's gonna be
Hmm.
immune to anything. It can be an official act. We don't understand what position we in, and I bet you most of us still not getting ready. I don't have everything, but I've been preparing. There's a few things I have to go get. Me and my people, we talking about we still don't have this yet. We still, but it's things we need right now. And this book is touching on what's going on right now, even with the black bourgeoisie who will tell you everything. All right, I'm just saying that's and I wanted to get on here and explain what I meant about the militia. I don't want nobody to think that's what I was saying. As long as you got a militia, you okay. That's not what I was
Well, thank you, Brother Bakari. And I mean, you're right. This book is as relevant today as it was when it was written, and the black bourgeoisie see themselves outside of us and they work against us in lots of ways because they will see things as they will see green instead of black, or they will present the idea that they see green instead of black. They will present the idea that they are better than black people and better than poor white people when in fact they're seen as less than white people because of their skin. That's why those that could pass do pass, because it's just easier for them to live that life.
Yeah, they think if they live their life, their worries, they think their worries is over if they live their life. Everything is okay if you live their life. If you pass, if you don't want to fight back, if you just co-sign everything, or damn near everything that white people say and what everybody else do. Because in today's time, it's not just white people that's screwing us over. Just go look in our community and look how we complain about how everybody treat us, but everybody can still come in your neighborhood and open up businesses, send their kids to college,
And
save
have
money.
success
Yes, have success in our neighborhoods and in
with our
our
money, with the same money that we could be spending on our own businesses, because it's our money that's funding their lifestyles. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I absolutely. You know what? I'm glad you're saying it, matron. That's what I've been telling people. This is why I tell people, y'all gonna say what I'm saying. You're tired of hearing it. I don't care. Hold your damn money. We can have community-owned businesses. We can have independent-owned businesses. We can control the economy in our neighborhood. We set the social standard in our neighborhood. We set all the political standards. What we want. We don't let other people come and just push us around. I'm tired of being pushed around. Black people act like a lot of us act like we ain't tired yet. We ain't tired yet. We're okay. We still looking to reach our hand. We still hoping, and this is my opinion. In most, I'm gonna say most of these people that screaming reparation, reparation, all they want is for white people to say we're okay and we love y'all. Black people, this is your. That's truly all they want. That's why they only fight other black people over and over and over. And a lot of these people, matron, will talk about the black bourgeoisie with you, but most of them want to replace the black. They want to be in that position. A lot of them upset they're just not in it. They just upset that they're not in the position. A lot of them, they're upset that they are not in that position. It's 2024. We're 100 years behind. That is sad. We damn near doomed as a people. It's going to be some individuals who going to make it. It's going to be some individuals survive. If anything jump off in this country, it's going to be some individuals that survive. But for the majority of us, we are damn near doomed. We can't stop fighting each other. And I ain't just talking about guns and bullets. I'm talking about social media. I'm talking about in every way. We can't stop fighting each other and start supporting each other long enough for us to even come up with a plan. These other people are more organized nationally than we are on our block. And that is sad. That is sad. They're more organized internationally than we are on our block, 2 blocks. They don't want to. I don't know. I don't know, Matron. I just know right now it's going to be some harder times. I see hard, extreme hard times ahead. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and we don't see the fact that it's going to be hard times, and that really and truly we're going to need each other like we've never needed each other before. But they don't teach you cooperative economics. They don't teach you how to build a worker co-op. They don't teach you how to be an entrepreneur, because if they taught you the game, then you could do what they do. They teach you that you got to go to school to get a degree, to spend a lot of money and time and waste time getting an education that they have constructed that is designed to totally confuse you.
Yep, I agree with that. But I agree with that. But I ain't even talking about what they teach. And I'm sorry, I'm just kind of playing a little devil. But I'm not even. We have our people that been talking about, and that's the sad thing. You talking about they won't teach us matron, and you are right. But we don't want to listen to our people that have experience and said things. We would rather hear somebody talk about who created hip hop than listen to somebody who truly have experience in how to build a community owned business, how to run a self sufficient community. Because it's easy to be, it can be done. Because as long as we have it, we can take their money too. Let them come buy from us. It's okay, but we control everything. We control it. But right now, we are easily controlled. We are easily controlled, and it's everybody that's doing it. It's not. It's everybody that's doing it to us. It's not just the white folk. It's the Arab. It's the East Indians. It's the Hispanics. It's the Orientals. We have allowed ourselves to become the laughing stock of the human species. I'm not talking about
Hmm.
me and you and the few people in the chat. I'm talking about us as a group with everything going on. I bet you if you go across YouTube right now, you're gonna find
Right.
people talking about Lord Jamar was right and KRS-One is wrong. Who created hip hop? That's gonna I said, well, man, it's something more important than who created hip hop. One of my friends, he got mad. How much spoke I say saying it's something more important than who created hip hop, man. Hip hop really ain't that important, but since it's that important to y'all, who control hip hop? There's no difference in hip hop in our community. You moving the goalposts. No, I'm not, dude. You arguing about who created something so you can be mad with Jamaicans, so you can be mad with whoever else, any other black people, so you can be mad with them, but you don't want to talk about who control it because you're scared to be mad with the white folks. Everybody make more money. I was watching it. I can't find it no more. Lord knows I wish I could. I can't remember the name. I just remember some people that was in it, but I can't find it. But it was a documentary talking about it. And this is something you can Google. Everybody make more money from hip hop than black people. Arabs, East Indians, Orientals, all them from selling CDs and doing everybody. This was back in the day when they were selling CDs, record stores, whatever. Everybody made more money from hip hop than black people. But we are arguing with other black people about who started hip hop, and it was started here as if that is something to be so damn proud of. Okay, that's not hip hop our culture. That's not everybody's culture. I'm just saying there's other things that's more important than who, but that's why our mind is. It's like we're children, and I hate to say it like that. It's like we're children to the world. White people can put somebody on and put them in the algorithm. Go create a documentary called Who Created Hip Hop. And they know that's what black people gonna gravitate to because they have the opportunity to fight Jamaicans. They had the opportunity to fight Haitians and people from all the Caribbeans and black people from Africa and black people that's pan African. They're saying black people created it and that's it, but it doesn't matter who created it, who control it. We need to be trying to get control of what we have. And plus, anyway, how many of those hip hop artists that y'all bragging on name something that the majority of them have done for the community? Name 10 of them that came and gave back. You understand what I'm saying? You can.
Absolutely. And as you said, it doesn't matter what you create. If you don't control your creation, it doesn't matter. That's just like all the patents and the ideas that Black people had stolen from them. You
Yep.
know, they created those things, but they weren't able to profit off of those things. So it doesn't matter who created it if you can't control it. if you don't own and control it.
Yep, like when you read the book, The Miseducation of the Negro, Carter G.
Hmm.
Woodson, right?
Hmm.
That's who wrote that. So when you go on, if we really remember that book, he go to talking about the first food wagon that he saw that was going around selling food. Do you remember that part of the book?
Hmm.
And it was a black family, right?
Right.
It was a black woman. He said that was the first one, and they would set out with their go places, set out with their wagon and sell food. So if that's really the first one, so that means we created the food truck industry too, then, right? But do we control it? Think about it.
We don't.
Because it wasn't food trucks back then. It was the wagons, horse and wagon, right?
Right.
And if they going out with the horse and wagon, setting up selling food, and it's the first one I see. It's the first one I see. So we created the food truck industry, but we allow people to come in and take that from us. Just like everybody saw the movie Cadillac Records, how they did the blues. It's how they do everything. But it's because we are so against one another and we still look to prove something to white people. We want to prove that we can live white. We can date their women. We can make these mixed babies and tell them they black. We want to prove that we can do all of that, but we don't want to prove that we can take care of ourselves. I want to say, I was, I drive trucks and I make deliveries, right?
Mm.
I was out in the mountains. The mountains is not a good place. It's not a safe place for black people. I know black people vacation there, but I'm letting y'all know now the Georgia mountains is not safe for us. If y'all go, y'all on your own. But I have to go but I go in the daytime. The only place I'm gonna stop is that place where I'm making a delivery, right? So as I went out and I made this delivery, I asked this guy, like, damn, dude, you got a contract? I ain't say like, I'm like, you got a contract with the school where you can bring your school buses at home? He was like, no. He said, these rich people don't want to be around us. He was talking about the middle poor white folks in the mountains, or middle class white people in the mountains, the rich people in the mountains, because there's a lot of money in the mountains, don't want to be around them. He said, so what he did was he bought one school bus and solicited a private school because they didn't have buses. And I think he said it's been 20 years now. And he got 10 buses and they just drive private schools. And as I was talking to a newly, we was like, I said, you know why we don't have the school buses for our private schools? Because when our people get money, and I just remember making a delivery to this one school, and I was talking about the school, and yeah, there were Steve Harvey kids go. There were Steve Harvey kids win in Atlanta Hawks. There were they players go, and where were they kids go. And I went to this other school, and I'm like, so that's why our matron bus services can't pick up black kids and take to the black private school, because our millionaires ain't trying to build private schools. They just want to go be around white people.
Exactly.
They just want to be like Kendrick
Exactly.
Perkins. My son is the only black person at his school.
Exactly. And and what they fail to understand is that integration and assimilation are forms of slow death, because the objective of integration and assimilation is to erase your blackness. They give you a white woman, you have white children, and in 2 generations, they'll never know that there was a black person in that lineage. They take the wealth and the resources out of the community, and they take away pieces of their soul. Integration and assimilation are forms of slow death.
I absolutely agree. That's what it is, a form of slow death. But for some reason, I remember Barbara Sizemore did the thing. Black people still don't get it. It's not the fact that black people still don't get it. You know what's worse than not getting it, matron?
Hmm.
What's worse than not getting it is not wanting to get it. That's worse than
Mhm.
not getting it. If you don't get it and want to get it and search so you can understand, that's one thing. But I don't even want to get it. Cause this is, you understand what I'm saying? That's
Yeah,
worse than not getting it. I don't even want to get it.
yeah, yeah. And that continues to this day to be a problem. They don't want to get it. or they get it and they choose to ignore the reality of their situation. Because it is not a flex to say that my child is the only Black child in this school. Do you know what that does to a child psychologically?
Yeah.
They don't see anyone like them in their immediate environment. The power structure is white, their peers are white. They do things like want to be white, and they wind up bleaching their skin and frying their hair and painting their skin and doing things to be white, to assimilate because they're children. They have a fragile mind.
Yep. You're right. But Matron, I thank you for letting me speak.
Well, thank you for coming on, Brother Bakari. As I
Mm,
said, I thank each and every one of you for listening. I thank you for your contributions and for your support. Remember to like, follow, and share this particular broadcast and like my channel. Remember to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I thank each and every one of you for being here. Peace, guys.
Hey, Matron, right
Mm,
quick before you go. You got a few more subscribers, right?
Yes, I got a few more subscribers.
I want you to know. I told people to I go to these to certain channels, and they were talking about the book. They was talking about the Black Anglo-Saxon and the Black Bourgeoisie, and I was on the HBCU channel because they were saying these books need to be taught in the in our university in the HBCUs as well. But anyway, I went on and I told them to go subscribe, and I noticed a few people, and I always share you on Twitter.
Well,
But
thank
whatever
you.
But whatever one I'm in, I tell people to go subscribe, because they were talking about these books. They was like, she reading, and so they went in, they put your thing in the chat, and they were like, I'm listening to it. She is sounding good. And the guy was like, Mr. Ford, oh, if you met him, talk to him. Mr. Ford is in his 70s, and I believe he remembered every page of the Black Bourgeoisie and the Anglo and Black. I believe he remembered every page and the Black Anglo-Saxons. But he was like, if she reading that, she got to read the Black Bourgeoisie next. I'm like, she is. Oh, I'm subscribing to her channel now. Then she gonna read both of them. I believe he remembered every page. But when they heard you was reading it, a lot of people they got excited. So I told them about your channel, and I always share you on Twitter.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate you and the work that you and Anthony McPhail do sharing this message and this content is incalculable. Thank you so much.
All right, you're welcome, and have a good one. And once again, thank you for letting me speak.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys. I'll see you tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace.